In this tutorial, we're going to build a proof of concept React application, which is going to be a chat application, which we're going to deploy on Heroku. So the idea here is that we've already built a Django channels chat server in the first tutorial of the Django building a chat room tutorial series. So we're going to utilize that. I'll go through the process of deploying that Django package onto Heroku again and setting up Redis and so on. But we're going to have the Redis application utilizing Django as the backend server for managing and directing all the chat information messages to all the different chat rooms. So essentially what we're building here in this tutorial is a React application which we're going to deploy onto React to connect to a Django server or to a Django chat server. Okay, so that didn't make sense, or you're a little bit confused with what's going on. Here we've got in Heroku, you can see that I've deployed two applications, a Django chat application, which is a server backend for our React application. And then we built a React application and we've also deployed that onto Heroku. So what we end up with is a simple React application whereby we can, let's just refresh, where we can type in a username and go into a chat room and then start chatting. And then, of course, what we can do just to show that it works, if I open up a new tab and type in someone else's name, blah, blah, we can start chatting. And now what we have is this asynchronous connection in the chat room, and we've created a live chat room utilizing React and a Django backend. So let's start by adding or creating a new application. So I'm going to call this just chat. So go ahead and npx that. So I'm assuming that you know how to create a new application, but you may have never used React before. So head over to the first tutorial on React where I show you how to build a simple to-do list if you've never used React before. Else, like I said, we're just going to build a very simple application here and just go over the basics of connecting to our server and creating a very simple chat application. So once your application is built, we're going to be utilizing, or I'm going to be utilizing Material UI here, which is a popular React UI framework in actual fact. I do apologize if this is not your favorite or preferred UI. If you prefer using Bootstrap or many of the other Material UI interfaces or frameworks that are available, there just is far too many of them, really. So we're going to first of all install that. If you're not too sure, I've never used this before, we're not going to go too far into this, but you'll just need to head over to Get Started and just go ahead and install. So here we're just going to use the npm install. So assuming that you've now created your new application, we just need to cd into chat first, and then go ahead and npm install the Material UI. Okay, so in addition to that, we're also going to install the WebSockets. So this is obviously going to allow us to connect to our server and help us manage the WebSocket connection and so on. So if you look down at the bottom here, gives you the exact instructions to do that. So we're just going to npm install WebSocket. So I may be contradicting myself a little bit here, but I'm going to presume that you've maybe watched the previous tutorial, or probably the only tutorial at this point on React in the React series on this channel. If you haven't, it doesn't matter too much because we're not going to go too far into this. We're just going to build or construct some simple code just to show proof of concept that we can utilize and build a simple chat client in React and utilize a Django backend. So really all you need to do once this has been created is go into the app.js file here, and we're just going to remove everything here. First thing I'm going to do, and we're just going to build up this page. So we aren't going to use multiple pages here. By all means, you can separate the code and structure your code in a different way, of course. But like I said, this is just going to be a proof of concept application for now. And then we'll spend time in this series then improving upon this and adding new functionality. So let's start off by adding all the imports for this component. You can see here that we're importing React component from React, and then we installed the WebSocket, so we import that into our component. So the rest of these imports here, you can see that we're just adding individual components from the Material UI, and that's going to be utilized later for our application to set the style in our application or component here. And at the end here, we're going to be utilizing styles in classes. So we're going to be utilizing with styles in Material UI to add some styles to our page. So you'll see that happening, and then I'll take you through what's going on later. So next up, we've just finished up the boilerplate for this component here. So we've got the class app and then the export default app. And then we've got the render and return. So here we're going to place all the items that we want to display on the page. And we'll start off with a simple container. So this is from the Material UI, and you can see here with component main. And then we give this a max width of XS. So it's going to be a really thin container, which is going to be placed in the center of the page. And that's where our chat application is going to be placed. So this application is going to have two views. The first view is going to be a form where the user can type in their username and the name of the room. And then secondly, once they've done that, they'll press submit, and then they'll be taken to another view whereby they then can start chatting in the chat room. So we're going to use this ternary here to make that decision. So on the left-hand side here is what's going to happen, or is going to be the code, and that's going to happen if is logged in is set to true. If logged in is set to false, then it's going to show the screen where the user has to type their username and the room name they want to join. So that makes a little bit more sense now when we add the state. So this is the state. Here we're going to add some data or save some data here in these variables essentially. You can see here we've got is logged in. So by default it's going to represent false, or to be assigned to false, which means that when the user goes to the page originally, the is logged in is going to be false. So they're going to be taken to the code on the right hand side here, which is going to have the username and room name form. So the user can then go into the chat room. So once they've clicked on that code, the is logged in state will be placed to or changed to true. And therefore the code on the left hand side here of this ternary will take action and then be able to actually type into the chat room. So you can see we've added some additional values here. So we have a value here, so a variable or a storage area for all the messages that are being sent in the chat room. We have value, which I'll explain in a little bit. We have a name. So this is going to be the username. So when the user types in a username into the form, the initial form, that's going to be placed in there. And obviously we can use it for different features. And then we have the room name. So even though I'm asking the user to type in the room name in this example, I'm just going to manually add this room name here, and it's always going to be the same room name. So in later editions of this code, we'll add that dynamic nature where users can actually assign themselves to different rooms. But for now, we're just going to go for this default room called ViaCAD, and that's going to be the only room that we're going to create. Okay, so now I've moved over to Django. So what you're seeing here is the Django package that's linked in the description of this video. So inside of here, you're going to see the Django package, which you can download, and there's a requirement text. So go ahead and create a new virtual environment if you want to, and then just run the requirement text. So this code here is from the first video of this series. I've made one addition to it just to make it work with React. So I'll show you that in a second, but essentially it's the same tutorial or same code from the first tutorial in this series. So the only change that we've made is if you go into the chat and the consumer, I've just added the name. So we're going to pass in the message across and also the name. So that's the only additionality that I've made. You can see all the different entries there where I've added the name. And last one here. Okay, so that's the only addition there. So I'm not going to go through the Django code here because by all means, to go to the first tutorial in this series, just go through that first and then come back to this tutorial. So what we want to do here in the settings, I've configured it to begin with. If I go into the core and settings, at the bottom here, I've configured the message broker to be in-memory channel layer. So we don't have to worry about Redis installation, etc. So this should just run on your local development machine. We will change this over when we put it into Heroku or upload it to Heroku. So for now, all you need to do is start the server, and we should be running on the 127.0.0.1.8.000. Now, if you remember the URLs, if we go in here, we're looking for to create a URL with the room name. If we go into routing, it's more specific. So in actual fact, when we create a room, we need to name the path WS, then chat, and then the room name. So that's important to remember. Okay, so back in React, the first thing that we're going to do is to build our connection string to the server. So I've just shown you all the details there, what we need to do. So I'll just write this down, and you can see here we're going to create a new connection utilizing W3C WebSocket. So this is from the WebSocket import that we created package. And you can see this is the actual route that we're going to create. So WS, so we're creating a WebSocket, 127.0.0.1.8.000. That's our local server for Django. And then remember the URL was WS and then chat. And then we're going to go ahead and just add from the state here the room name, which is ViaCAD. So that's going to be placed there. And then we need to not forget the trailing slash, otherwise it won't work. So that's how we're going to build a connection to Django. So to actually build a connection, so this is obviously the string that we're going to utilize, or the function, sorry, that we're going to utilize to actually create a connection. But we need to call that and actually then create an open connection to the server. So to do that, we're going to use the component did mount. So this is a hook that gets invoked right after a React component has been mounted. So this is just part of the React lifecycle. So we want to create the connection right after the React component has been mounted. So we're going to place all the code to create and open the WebSocket in here. So let's go ahead now and do that. So what we're going to need is the client. So we refer to that as this, and then the client, and then on open. So this is going to create a connection now to the server. We're using on open. We're using these details here to create the connection, or to link to the Django server to create a connection. That's where Django is expecting our WebSocket URL to be placed. So we can now go ahead and just check to see if this is working. So inside of here, we've created a connection. So if we have created a connection, let's just now run some code. So we're just going to console log here and then just output WebSocket client has been connected. So this will just test to see if we've actually created a connection to our Django server. So let me just get rid of this for now so that the code will run. And let's just test this out. Okay, so if I run the code and then just go into the console here, you can see that we've got the message WebSocket client connected. Apologies if you don't know how to start the React application. So I've typed into the console npm start. That starts the React application. Apologies if I didn't make that clear. So that's what I've done there. And I've started the React application. That will open up in a new browser. And just using the default page here, I've gone into the console, and you can now see we've got our message WebSocket client connected. Now, if we go into Django, we should also now see a connection. You can see here that we've got this WebSocket connection at the bottom here, and that's what we've just established. Well, hopefully you agree that that was incredibly easy. Once we've sorted Django, creating a connection, very much just following the similar JavaScript we utilized in Django, except we're just porting that across to React. Of course, it's just JavaScript at the end of the day. It's all the same. I say it's all the same very lightly, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so back to the code then. Let's now build this out. So you can see here that we've got our ternary back here. So we've got A on the left-hand side and B on the right-hand side. So like I said, if it is logged in equals false, so if this is equal false, then it's going to show B. So if I had to run this application now, it's going to display B on the screen here. And then just to show you, if I change this to true, then on the left-hand side, well, it's going to say A. So you can clearly see that this ternary is working in that manner. So let's just change this back to false. And now let's create our form, our user form, so that they can type in their username and the room name. Okay, so if you're not familiar utilizing Material UI, here I'm just going to show you an example. We're going to add some styles to this. There's plenty of different ways of doing this, but down the bottom here, we're just going to, with styles, use styles. So we then create some styles. So I'm going to be utilizing some styles up in the top here, and it's going to be called use styles. So use styles. Here, this is just referencing the styles that I'm going to be placed at the top in a new variable. So let's go to the top here, and just underneath where we import everything, before the actual class app, we just add some styles. There we go. So I'll run through these as we use them, but you can see what's happening here is just a little bit of CSS ultimately. We're using margins, defining margins for the form, and we've got an avatar, so we just added some more styling here. So like I said, I'll run through this as and when we get to it, but you can see what's happening here. If you're familiar to CSS type of format, you can see we're just adding some styles. Okay, so I feel as I'm embellishing that there, but that's just one technique you can use to add styles. I will add styles in different ways just to show you if you're not familiar adding different styles in different places. I'll add it in different places so you can just see where you could potentially add different CSS styling to your page. Okay, so finally with the styles, we're just going to add just below the render here a new variable classes here, and this is just going to point the code to the classes that we've made up here so that we can access them. So we'll see that happening shortly. So now let's go ahead and build up our first screen, our first view here, which is going to be the form to allow users to type in their name and the room name. Okay, so this is what we're building next. This is the view. This is the final code for the chat room name, and then user can also type in their username. So once they press start chatting, what's going to happen is that we're going to change is logged in to true, and then we're going to then use the code on the left-hand side here of this ternary. So you can see here, we're just now going to go through the code on the right-hand side. Just going to go over step by step, stage by stage, just show what's happening here to build what I've just shown you here. So you can see that we're using Material UI. So there's a nice kind of UI interface that we can build utilizing the pre-existing code that Material UI has. And this is why we imported all these items here. So let's go through the code step by step. So you can see we've contained it within a div here. We've got the CSS baseline, and then we've got a new div. And you can see here I'm calling classes and then paper. So if I track that back, we've got classes here, and then we're moving back to here, and we've got paper right here. And these are the styles that we've imported in, and we're utilizing this style. So that's how we're tracking back to this style that's defined at the top here. So once we've got that in place, you can see that we've then added just a title here called Chatty Rooms, and then we've got our form. So I'll explain what the form does in a minute, but I'll just take you through this. Okay, this is Material UI, don't forget. So we've got a text field, and these are all the parameters that build up the text field. So we've got margin, it's full width, using ID as email, label, name, familiar HTML items that you're probably familiar with when building a form. But here we have value. Okay, so this is the input for the room. And you can see here that the value has been set to the state room, which currently is ViaCAD. So once that's in place, if we didn't have the ability to actually change it, this piece of code here, because we've defined the value of the input field, we can't actually change it. So we have to use the onChange for when someone actually types in something into the input form to then actually make the input form change to what someone's typed in. And then what we're doing also here is we're setting the state to whatever is in the value. So when someone starts to type something into the input, we're saving the value into the state room. So that's how the room name is going to be then applied here. Now, this is a little bit confusing because, like I said, we're not actually going to use this in this implementation, this code implementation, but we will do in later tutorials. But for now, we're just going to have a static room. So what's actually going to happen is that when this page loads, remember we're using component did mount. So in actual fact, this is going to load up first with this room name. So it doesn't matter what we change the room name to later because we've already created the connection here to the server with this room name. So like I said, I apologize if that's a little bit confusing reason why I'm doing that, but I just wanted to show, like I said at the start, just proof of concept piece of code just to get it working in the chat room. So we are using ViaCAD even though we're changing it later because we're using component did mount to the life cycle. In the life cycle, this is going to load up first. Okay, so now that's in place, we've got one text field here for the username. So there's a similar process here. You can see that we're just using margins, names, labels, and so on. And the value again changes. So the value starts off with the state name. So the state name is nothing in the name to begin with. And then we're just changing it as someone types it. Okay, we have a standard button here at the bottom. And you can see here in this form that when we submit the form, what happens is that on submit equals, we're basically going to set the state is login equals true. So as soon as someone adds a value here in this text field, in this bottom text field, and presses a button, we've captured the information already in the state that the user's typed in. And then we just go ahead and change is logged in to true from false to true. And now the code now switches over to the left-hand side of this ternary, which is going to be the chat room. So just to finish this off, you can see what we've got here at the bottom. It's just some placements here for some placement text, as if you're going to maybe build this. Of course, you can change all this. It's just for show. So you can see that that's what we've now built. Everything should be working. These links don't go anywhere. But we should be able to type something in here and something in here and press start chatting. And you can see that takes us to A on the left-hand side of the ternary. Now, if you have the React plugin, the React Developer Tools in Chrome, this is, just open that up by pressing F12 and going into components. We should now be able to see on the right-hand side, the name and room that we've just entered into the form is actually appearing in the state here. And we can see that here on the right-hand side. Okay, so now let's deal with the actual chat room. So this is on the left-hand side here of this ternary. So let's now deal with that. Okay, so this is the final product. So we start with like this. You can see we're going to have a box in the middle here, which is going to show all the messages. We've just got this room up here with the room name. And then we're going to be able to make a comment right here and press start chatting. That comment is then going to go into this space here. And that will be the actual message that's been sent to the server and returned. So if we just press it now, in actual fact, it's not going to work because we've not hooked this up to the server. So that's what the current experience is going to be. So let's now go into the code and see what's happening. So remember, this is on the left-hand side of the ternary. So we start just here, So you can see we've created this div, and now I've just added a margin at the top here. So this is an additional way of adding some styling. And the room name is going to be from the state. So we get that from the state, which is whatever we typed in here in the previous screen. And then we're going to use a paper here. So just a kind of a blank screen we can then mold. And I've added some more styling. So height, max height, overflow, and bulk shadow. So this paper here is referring to that screen you saw where we can actually type in something. So actually display all the messages. So it's this box here we're referring to here. So you can see I've added a max or a maximum height. So it's a fixed height, but it has overflow. So it's going to scroll down as we type in messages. We've then gone ahead and we created some more code just here. So this is essentially looping through all the messages inside of the state messages. So when a messages come back from the server, we're going to store it in the messages, in the message state here. You can see it's going to be an array of messages. So what we're going to do is use map to then extract all of those out and put them inside of this area here. So you can see what we're extracting out, or what we're displaying, is a new card. Again, that's just a material UI element. And we've got here the avatar. So again, this is just a material UI element, just display a general avatar. And on the right hand side of that, we're going to have the title, which is going to be the message name. And then we're going to have a subtitle, which is going to be the message. So there's two things that we're going to print out from the server that's returned, the data that's being returned from the server, the name and the message. So we now have everything in place. So all we need to do now is create the functionality to send the message, receive a message, receive any messages and put it into the messages array here. And then it can just be printed out onto the screen right here. Okay, so where this is going, it's going to go right here. And similar to what we did in the first tutorial, we're using onMessage. So anytime we receive a message, we're going to pick that up. And you can see that we're going to put that data into message, or we're going to refer to that data that's returned as message. And now we're going to deal with the data. So next up, we've got the data back now. So we're just going to put this into the new variable here called data from server. And you can see that we're going to parse that data. So message.data. So remember, we returned it back as message. We're going to parse that data, JSON parse that data, message, and the data within that. And we're going to put it into this variable here called data from server. Okay, so let's just finish this off. So we've got, we collect the data, if we receive a message, we're then going to collect that data and put it into this new variable called data from server. And then we're going to go ahead and create an if statement. So if there is data from the server, we're then going to add to the state, set state. And what we're going to set is a new item in messages. And that's going to include the data that's returned, message. So the message that's returned from the server, and then the data that's being returned, the name from that data that's being returned. And we're going to store that into these new variables here, message or name values, message and name. And you can see down here, when we output the data onto the screen, we're referring to it as name and message. So that matches that up there. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So now we can receive messages. So let's now talk about actually sending a message. So let's go down into our code and have a look to see how messages have been sent. So here what we have is a form. So this is underneath the paper element here where we see all the messages. We have a form. So we have two inputs, the text field where we can actually type in information. And you can see here it's the same type of principles. We've used the state value to actually input. When someone types in a comment, that comment goes into the state value. And you can see here we've got the on change again so that we can actually type something into the input form and save it directly into the state value. And then we've got the button here. Okay, so in actual fact, when we press that button, this is what's going to happen. On submit, we're then going to inflict or incite the on button clicked function. So the on button clicked function is going to run. So now we need to actually build this function. Now remember, at this point, the user has typed in something into the input form here, the message they want to send. And that value is now inside of this state value here. So now let's create a new function so that we can actually send a message. Okay, so this is not going to go into the component div mount. So we're going to create the on button clicked function first of all. That's now placed in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use this client. So we're using the client again, so we know where we're sending the information. And then we're going to use send. So we have on open we used before, and now we use send. Okay, so now we've got send. We're going to JSON stringify the information. So we've got type message. And then we've got the actual message, which is going to be collected from the state value. That's what the user's just typed in. And then this state, the name. So remember, before the user gets to the place where they can start chatting, on that screen, they type in their name and that goes into the name state here. So we're just collecting that. And this is what we're going to send across to the server. So at this point, there's just two things that we need to do. First of all, if you remember, we've just typed in a comment into an input form. Now that's not going to go anywhere until we've actually removed it. So we just need to remove that from the state. So go ahead and run that process. And then we just need to run the ePrevent default. Okay, so let's test this out. Let's add a name. I'll just call myself admin. And the chat room name you can change, but like I said, we've already built the connection to the server. This was just for show. And we type in or press start chatting and make a new comment. Hello. Press enter and you can see that we've now sent a message, we've received a message, and there's the message. So it looks like everything is working okay. So we can test this by opening up a new instance. So if I were to, for example, just copy this into a new tab, you can create a new name here. Nice name. Start chatting. If I type in something here, start chatting, then go back. If I go back to my other tab, you can see I've now received a message. So I'll send a message back and you can now see I've got a message back. So clearly it is working okay. So sorry to point this out again, but this is just proof of concept. This code is very naive, of course, but it has the main elements or the building blocks to start working with WebSockets connecting to Django. So now we've got this in place, we're just going to go over the process of actually getting this onto a web server. So we're using Heroku again. So in the second tutorial in this series, we did go through the process of actually getting the Django application started on Heroku. So I will just go through it one more time, but I've already given you the code this time. So in actual fact, it should be a really straightforward process. Like the previous tutorial, I am going to be utilizing GitHub to deploy on Heroku. So there's a little step that we're going to take with the React to get it served online with Heroku, but that's really simple. So now let's just go ahead and make some changes in the Django application so that we can prepare it to be actually served online. So let's just go ahead and go into the Django application. So there's just one setting that you need to change before you actually commit this to Heroku. Now, for demonstration purposes, in this development environment, I've set the channel layer to in-memory channel layer. So it just utilizes the computer here. But of course, online with Heroku, we're going to need to use Redis. So you're just going to need to block that out and then unblock this here. And we're going to be utilizing this setting here to actually then run a Redis service on Heroku. Okay, so you can skip this if you don't need this, but we're just going to go through first how to actually install the Django application that I've just provided you in the link in the description. So first of all, we just need to create a new application. I'm going to call this something functional, Django Chat App. Django Chat App is available. Yep, okay. So we'll just go for that, and then we create the application. And then what we're going to need to do is go to the resources, and we're just going to need to add in the Redis, Heroku Redis again. So we'll just add that. Okay, so that'll take a couple of seconds to load up and so on. But while it's doing that, we'll go over to the deploy. And then I'm just going to connect via GitHub to the repository. So my repository is called this right here. And we'll search for that. There it is. And I'm just going to connect to that repository. And once you've done that, you just need to then go down and deploy. Okay, so once you've deployed, you open the application at the top here and you take you to a new page. And this is what you should see. Now I should be able to create a new chat room and press enter. Now this isn't going to work because I haven't changed the code. I might do before I release this to YouTube, but I just need to add a few lines here to get it working. So that wasn't the intention of this tutorial, but everything seems to be working here okay. So what we actually need now is this link here, right? So let's go ahead and copy this link and let's go back into our React application and let's just change the link. So we'll go back down here because obviously we're not using localhost anymore. So we want to build a WebSocket link to this new application. So it's going to be WS and then Django chat app, Heroku app / chat. So let's save that. That's our new location. So let's go ahead now and just make sure it's on, and then go back into our application, our React application, and let's just try this out. So let's add a new name, admin, start chatting, and then I'll just type hello, start chatting, and we seem to have a problem. Okay, so if we just double check the application again, what we need to remember is that if we go back into the Django application and then look at the routing, we need to remember it's WS / chat. So that's the pattern that we're trying to create. So let's go back into our application, our React application, and let's just type in now WS / chat. Okay, so if we go back onto our page now, we can see that we have the WebSocket client connected. So let's type in a user admin, start chatting, just close this up and see if we can actually say hello. There we go. So we don't need to actually press this button, we can just press enter. So let's now just go over to a Django. I've made the changes in the code. So you can see here that I'm now just going to go to chat and via CAD, that's the name of the room. And then this is from Django, just type in hello. So we now should see in our React application, says hello, and so on. So you can see we now have React working on the local host to the Django implemented on Heroku. So obviously all we need to do now is implement React onto Heroku, and we're good to go. Okay, so back in Heroku then, let's just go back to our homepage, our admin dashboard, and then just select a new component or app, create a new app, and we'll just call this React Chat Django, and we'll create a new app. And then we're just going to deploy this in a similar fashion using GitHub. So if you are using Git, or you've never used GitHub before, don't forget you don't need to include the node modules when you upload your React application to GitHub. So these are the packages that you're going to need, or the files that you're going to need. Okay, it's probably also worth noting that obviously this is my URL. Yours is going to be slightly different just here, obviously. So just make sure you've made that change too. Okay, so I now have the React application in GitHub. So all I need to do is connect to it. So this is the repo, press search, should find it. I've got two versions here. I'm going to go with the React backend. So I'll connect that. Okay, so before I deploy this, I'm going to need a Heroku build pack for this. So this is going to just streamline the deployment of React on Heroku. So what I need to do is just make sure that I've got this link here to this build pack, which is essentially, just read through it, it tells you what's going to happen. Basically, this automates the deployment with Heroku. It serves up everything, and it should be sweet and smooth to deploy React in this manner. So we're going to need this build pack. So let's go back into Heroku and set this up. So if you go over to the settings and then go down here to the build packs, we can add a build pack. So let's do that. So we can just paste in the URL to the build pack and press save changes. And now we're going to utilize that build pack when we build the application. So let's go back into the deploy and then press deploy branch. Okay, so now we've deployed. I've gone over to the link. Now it doesn't work to begin with. So if you remember in the previous tutorial, we had to change because we haven't set up HTTPS, and that's the default. We just need to go into the setting over here and just select HTTPS. So I'll show you again. I'll just close that. So if you open the app, once you've deployed the React application, that's going to open. It's going to have a blank screen. So if you go over to the URL here, you just need to remove the S and then the app will load. So let's go ahead and just change a username to hello again, start chatting. Just scale this down so you can see it. So you can now hopefully see we're going to say hello, and that seems to be working. So we're online, we're connecting to our Django server on Heroku. So you can see that is working okay. So let's just build a new instance of this or add a new tab to see if we can see the messages. So if I go back now to the other tab, you can see that it's working. So we now have an online chat application utilizing Heroku, React, and Django. Hello, and welcome back to another React Django project tutorial.